Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle, and I serve as president of Stadia, where we help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. Welcome to this episode of the Church Planting Podcast. Marc Estes is a pastor, speaker, author, and leader with more than 40 years of experience in ministry. He has experience in leadership, experience in the marketplace. He's the co-founder and president, CEO of Visitor Reach, which is an AI-driven platform helping churches connect with newcomers and seekers more effectively. He's formerly the senior pastor of Manor House in Portland, Oregon. Marc has led global church movements, trained leaders in over 70 nations, and helped plant churches worldwide. Welcome, Marc, to the Church Planting Podcast. Well, I'm absolutely delighted on this episode of the Church Planting Podcast to have Marc Estes. Marc, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast.
It is so great to be with you and obviously your entire listening audience. Thanks so much for the opportunity today.
Well, there's so much we could unpack. We may have to do multiple episodes. I'm doing a tease there for us, Marc, already because, let's just start off with, man, you're out in Hermosa Beach, California. I'm in Cleveland. What's up with that? How did God call you to California, brother? We all want that.
Someone has to live the rough life out here. Born and raised in the area, ended up in Portland for about 30 years, came back full circle, chasing grandkids and kids, and now residing at the beach. We love it.
You were a senior pastor or a pastor for quite a while. Was that up in Portland, or where was that?
Yeah. So I did a short stint up in Lake Tahoe, another difficult place, and was up there as a pastor, and then traveling actually, worldwide, doing evangelism seminars for local churches, and did that for quite a season. Ended up in Portland, Oregon, working for a legacy church for about 30 years. In the last 10 years, I had the wonderful privilege of being the senior pastor of that church, president of our Bible college and our global movement. But and that's probably why I don't have any hair, right? I was the senior pastor in Portland.
Yeah, that's not an easy field. I know that. And then today, though, you're in something entirely different, which we're really excited about it. Tell us a little bit about Visitor Reach. Yeah,
I had no idea I was going to jump into a tech company, but it really is the new Roman road, right? It's where people
absolutely
are really today, and we could talk a whole lot about that. But my ultimate goal coming out of being a senior pastor was to stay in our global movement. We planted churches all over the world and just passionate about planting churches. And so I thought I was just going to be a pastor for pastors and, help multiplying movements in all of our global hubs and stuff. And through the pandemic, going back into 2020, and there were these tectonic shifts beginning to happen in culture, which really got our attention. And we started to have some conversations about what was taking place, which came up with a couple God thoughts, which turned into an idea, which turned into a business model that a couple of us guys decided to fund. And in God's great humor, he tricked me into taking a step, burning my ships, and jumping into being the CEO of a company that's just trying to help churches reach people where they're at today, and having the time of my life.
So tell us a little bit about the company, because Stadia, I know we've been in dialogue with you all and, kind of unpacking and exploring some potential partnership and different things. One of our guys on staff, Alex Robinson, said, man, you've got to meet Marc and what they're doing. So when you say that, how do you help?
Yeah, so we basically do 5 things. And, we're coming alongside of a church, any church, USA, we're in 44 states right now. And we're just really trying to help a church be effective in reaching people where they're at. That's the digital highway. People are spending 7.25 hours a day in digital spaces. They're looking for hope. They're looking for truth, for answers, for relationships. Sadly, the church isn't in that space. Yes, we do have social media pages and we're posting reels, but basically we're regurgitating the same algorithms with the same people when, there's literally millions of people every day within reach in metro areas of people that are looking. So we work with people with their digital health optimization. We call it an omni-channel approach, where we're trying to fix website authority and social media authority and their voice authority. And, we're trying to do everything that we can do to try to help them. When people actually pick up their phone and say, find a church near me, they can be found. They want to be discoverable. Second thing, we're just doing personalized ads and personas to try to help them get the right messaging to the right people in the right place. We have a lot of technology that are helping then conversations to take place, engaging people one-on-one, two-way conversations when they want to have the conversation. America will send 5.5 billion texts today. So it is the new universal way in which we communicate.
I tell people, don't call me, text me.
That's right.
Text me.
Right. 2 trillion texts a year. And then we do tap technology. We're very big in tap technology, front runners in that space. And then we coach churches. We come along the backside, and things are changing so fast. Churches just aren't up to speed when it comes to really where technology is taking them. So it's all inclusive. That's what we do. We want to come and be a great strength to pastors to help them reach more people that are open. 74% of people say they're open to spiritual things today. So let's just get in front of those people, right? And so we work really hard to help a church do that.
Okay, so on my other screen over here, I'm on your website right now. So if you want to check this out, go to visitorreach.com. Their site, as you can imagine, is fantastic, and there's loads of information there. A get started button, real easy, and Mark will come consult with you for free and get you all set. No, I'm just kidding. No, but just seriously, go to their website, check it out, and we'll get going. So you're helping people reach people, Mark. But I just read your latest book and was really excited. The Road We Must Travel Again. And what a great book! And you're uncovering a parable. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But give us some background on. I love this idea, the road we must travel again. What caused this? What's the why behind it? Where did it come from?
Yeah, it's really my life message, to be quite honest. I was saved out of a ditch, and I probably never left the ditch. I love helping hurting, broken people. And, there's just these huge shifts that have taken place in culture today. And I think the church is just a little bit slow in responding to those shifts. And I do have to say, I'm a local church guy. I love the local church, part of the local church, give my life to the local church. So I'm not here to beat up the local church, but I am to face, here to face some brutal facts. And, if you go back 50 years, we had a thing called the Jesus People movement.
Yep.
Great move of God. And one of the key attributes of that particular era was the church lived out what I call in the book, the gospel of go, is we went to where people were at, right? And over a period of time, we had this emerging new trend or new era called the church growth movement. We begin to build invitational, attractional Christianity.
That's what I did, Mark. That's what I did.
Yeah, we all did. And, back then it worked. Let's give credit where credit is due, but we are in much more of an era where a Judeo-Christian ethic was a part of culture. So inviting people just seemed to be easy. But as culture has shifted, the churches remained the same in their strategies. And we moved to a gospel of come, right? Come to church, come to Easter, come to Christmas. My term, my place, my people, my language, come. And they're no longer coming, right? And so we're seeing right now the church is and this is really what provoked me. We're watching, 85% of churches are plateaued or declining, 12% growing through transfer growth, only 3% through conversion growth. We'll close the door on 4,000 churches this year, and we'll only plan 1,000. And so you just start looking at all of these statistics. And when we look at the scoreboard, someone just has to ask the question, should we be changing what we're doing in order to reach the harvest, right? And that was the premise of the book. And, as I read through the Good Samaritan story, there's really 3 characters in that story. Obviously, Jesus, we see the Good Samaritan, but oftentimes we live out the religious lawyer, who's the real person that Jesus is having the conversation with. And the book's kind of set up in two parts. That first part is really dealing with the mindset of the 21st century church today, which is very parallel to the religious lawyer, set in their ways, doing all the right things, going to church, tithing, memorizing the first 5 books of the Bible. I'm sure we've all done that, right? And so you begin to look at this religious lawyer, and probably a good guy, probably had a great family, had a great belief system, abided by all of the.
It's kind of like the parable of the older son in the prodigal son story. There's a lot of similarities there, pointing the finger and walking on by. Yeah. So you got the religious lawyer. Yeah.
And so he begins to actually have some conversation with Jesus where he's asking Jesus questions and Jesus is asking him. It's very interesting to see the tone and the spirit of those questions that really align so much to where we've gradually shifted as a church culture, Western Christianity today, and why we're missing perhaps one of the greatest awakenings in history. And so Jesus says, hey, by the way, let me tell you a story about a Good Samaritan. And it's very ironic, timely, and if I could use this term very carefully, very prophetic, that he identifies 6 attributes. Like Greg, these are significant and very timely. And again, I'm using the word carefully, prophetic. It is the word of the Lord to the church today. If we would just embrace and apply these 6 attributes, I believe that the church is going to be back into a place and a position to reach people by the millions. Like I said, 74% of people today are saying, hey, I'm open to spiritual things. 1 out of 4 go to church if they were just invited by a relative, friend, neighbor, coworker. And so we have this huge opportunity, but we're just not going where.
Okay, let's unpack some of that. The attributes. I mean, we're all kind of going, okay, what are they? And I mean, you need to go pick up the book, Marc Estes, The Road We Must Travel Again, subtitled Returning to the Place We Were Meant to Live. It's on Amazon and every other digital site you can buy it on, and it's probably in your airport bookstores. But anyhow, it's Amazon for sure, because I just was on there today that's where I got mine. And so 6 attributes.
Yeah. So, let's just first of all, we have to identify, first of all, as that story begins to unfold, we recognize the guy that was in the ditch that was half dead. Jesus asked him a little bit earlier, who is my neighbor? He asked the question. And again, the religious lawyer he asked Jesus that question. It's interesting because he wasn't really, asking some compassionate question. He was really just trying to say, how far do I have to go and still be good?
Yeah.
And so, before we even talk about these attributes, we have to recognize our heart condition in many ways is we have gone to the other side. Levite and priest saw the man's condition, went to the other side. The issue today isn't that we don't see the problems. Right now, we're watching what's happening with immigration and ICE. We had, go through the race issues. Before that, we see transgenderism. And let's just go down the list of these moral wars that are happening in our country. And if we're not careful, the old saying is you pick a side, you divide. And what's happening is we see the condition, but we've gone to the other side. And so we have to start, first of all, with this reality is that Jesus is really asking the question, really, what kind of neighbor are we? Not who is my neighbor, but really, what am I willing to go there? And so as he tells the story, first thing he really begins to talk about is this whole idea and this certain Samaritan, when he saw his condition, it says he went to where he was at. We have to, please listen to me. We have to shift to the gospel of go. We've got to begin to mobilize our church and our people, and we need to go where people are at relationally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and digitally. Like the church has to go. It's taking 12 to 15 connect points with a person before they'll even consider walking through the door of a church. and 7 to 10 more before they even give their life to Christ. And most churches have a 1, 2, 3, 4 process orientation to this kind of transactional relationship. We have to go. We have to get the church out. That's the first thing that Jesus
Okay, so we have to go, Mark, but I think we have to recognize here as well. It's going to be messy. I mean, I can see, that Samaritan going, I'm in my nice robe, whatever. I got my good clothes on. And this dude's down bloody in the ditch. And that's kind of, we need to recognize that, right? That it's going to get messy for us.
Yeah, I spend a whole chapter on that because, again, Jesus portrays that the harvest isn't, a couple with 2 kids, a white picket fence, a nice looking poodle that just got shaved and they're going to tithe and serve the first week they walk in, right? Right. He's talking about, hey, the harvest is messy. So I do a whole chapter that just talks about what is the heart, who is my neighbor, right? So I talk about beliefs, behaviors, perceptions, attitudes, because if we don't understand, we will never be understood. We have to understand what do they believe? How do they behave? Why are they the way that they are? And so I try to unpack an entire chapter to just go, hey, let's just realize this is going to be a little bit different than our gospel of come culture that we built, right? Yeah. So that's such an important part.
Okay, gospel of go. Got it written down. What's next?
Yeah, and so he goes on in the story, and he says, and so when he what did he do? He got into the ditch. He went to where he was at, and then it says that he pulled out a bandage, and he also poured oil and wine. And it's ironic, as you look at, if you want to just unpack that a little bit, from a hermeneutical standpoint, you're recognizing that oil represented Holy Spirit, miracles, signs, wonders. You take a look at the wine represents anesthetic, cleansing. And again, Jesus is trying to say, yes, the harvest is messy, and a Sunday morning polished experience isn't going to dig deep enough into the issues that people are facing in order for them to get healed and whole. Let's keep doing our next step class and our growth tracks. Like, let's keep doing that stuff. I'm not going to pick at that. But there's another layer. People are coming in broken, hurting. 111 million people today, are struggling with some form of depression, 75 million with anxiety. And you just start looking at the layers of divorce.
That's a third of our population, Mark.
Yes. And so we bring in, and again, what we're hoping is somehow, and there is some kind of an individual responsibility every new person has to take in their own personal journey. But what we're seeing is that this Good Samaritan got in the ditch and he began to minister Holy Spirit, oil, healing, prayer, deliverance, cleansing. And so as we look at that practically, what do we have in our ministry strategies and our training strategies of leaders that are equipping them to be able to minister bandage, oil, and wine with people coming in? Again, it's another area we need to really hone in on and have some conversations with our teams about.
Yeah, I love that. It's going to take some training, and I know that you guys help with that, but it's because, like you said, that's not training we're getting in most places, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we've got the gospel of go. We've got a minister healing with oil and wine, the Holy Spirit. Attribute 3.
Attribute 3, and again, it is all about discipleship. He put him on his donkey, took him to an inn. The guy was busy. He was going somewhere, and he decided to stop his life for the sake of another. And the whole chapter, I deal with the paradigm shifts that need to happen in Western culture today when it comes to building a proper discipleship culture. Again, we've institutionalized the discipleship approach. We're kind of too busy for relationship. We're hoping that classes, we're hoping that curriculums, and for that matter, even just programmatic groups. And again, I'm not slamming any of this. I just got to keep re-clarifying. But who's my other? Who's the one-on-one person that I'm going to invest my time, talent, treasures in to begin to pour on that person to make sure I can get them to the end, to get them to the local church, to the health center, to the place of refuge. And so I spend a whole chapter, again, just kind of portraying this, but then looking at some of the things where we need to shift when it comes to our discipleship approach. We try to be sequential. We try to be spiritual only. We try to be programmatic. And all of those things, again, Eastern culture and what Jesus portrayed to us was much different. And so the whole idea, let's go back to the road again. Let's go back and look what Jesus was telling us that we might apply it to our 21st century westernized context. So the third one is this whole idea of discipleship, right?
It hurt when you said it. It hurt me personally. It's probably Holy Spirit, Mark, because you said, who are you going to stop your life for? And actually make them a priority and disciple and so forth. And I'm going, man, I am so selfish so much of the time with my time and unwillingness to stop my life to disciple.
Yes, it's so important, and I'm going to jump ahead, but it's a point that applies to what we're talking about. I make this statement, and it's been a life statement for me, is that you'll never be successful in ministry till you have spiritual grandchildren. And as I was raising my kids, and again, I've now got grown kids, 45, 41, 36, 35, and I've got grandkids. I used to always think that I measure my success as a parent by how my kids turned out until I had grandchildren.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And then all of a sudden I went, wait, because if I do believe in this, and again, this is attribute number 5, multiplication, but it's one thing to raise godly kids. It's another thing to raise godly kids to teach them to in turn do likewise, right?
Yeah.
And so I know you're a multiplication movement. I'm all about multiplication. One of my heroes is Dave Ferguson. I'm going to give a shout out for Dave. Love that
Dear
guy.
Dear friend.
He wrote the foreword to the book, and it's why
I saw it. Yep.
Yeah. And but it's like when it comes to this area of discipleship, it's not just enough that I'm getting someone to read their Bible and I'm getting them to pray. Have I taught them to actually raise up the next generation to be godly too? So when I look at all of my grandkids, and again, they're all free moral agents, but I see them, they love the local church, they love God, they're serving in the local church. And so I can say that I did a great job as a parent because they reproduce themselves in their kids, and their kids are in turn doing likewise, right? And that's a whole part that requires personal, relational, one-on-one connection with someone where I'm going all in, not just for a 4-week commitment or a 6-week small group class, but man, God put this person in my life and I'm going to walk through them, whether that's years or decades. And I got guys right now that are now senior pastors that were in my junior high, that I led to Christ in junior high, that are now pastoring and seeing 5, 6, 7, 8 generations of leaders. And I go, now that is what it's all about. Not about the hokey pokey, right? But that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Okay. Gospel of Go, minister healing, discipleship, attribute 4.
Well, you really got to start talking about the whole idea. And then he took out 2 denarii. And again, the whole book, I'm talking to church pastors and leaders, right? 98% of churches today spend less than 2% on outreach, and the majority of that money is for colonial missions. Keep sending it to missionaries. They need our help. I love that. I'm a global guy. But again, the first thing to always be cut, or the last thing to always be funded, and I use the word always loosely, but I'm pretty close based on statistics, is outreach. When you look at Jesus, 199 recorded ministry situations, 128 were evangelistic. So 66% of his resource, his time, his talent was invested in lost people. And what we're finding today when it comes to funding, he took out 2 denarii. This wasn't a tip. It wasn't like, hey, I'm helping someone out personally, so I'm going to give you a $10 bill. This was a couple days' wages. Jesus is trying to emphasize that, listen, we have to have commitment as leaders, pastors, when we're looking at our budgets, when we're looking at how we staff. It's got to cost us something. We've got to invest significantly into reaching people, right? So goes your treasure, so goes your heart. And again, if we're not funding stuff, you're not going to get the return that you want. And I say this in the book, we all should be taking or doing a mercy audit. Like pull open your budget and actually look at how much money is going towards reaching lost people locally, how much money is going to staffing outreach people, like if you're a larger church or whatever it might be. And so this is a real important topic. And it's kind of one of the challenges we face as a company, because a lot of people go, well, we really can't afford to do it. And you see that 85, I think it's 85% of all budgets are spent for internal purposes, primarily staffing for internal needs and buildings. You have 13% that is going towards just operation stuff, glue, kids, Twinkies. And then you've got the 2% that goes towards outreach. And I'm trying to encourage the church today to say, if we're going to reach the harvest, we've got to put our money where our mouth is, or put our wallet into what we're doing. So that's a really important part of the book as well.
Okay. And then the next one is multiplication.
Multiplication, baby. Let's go.
Okay. So where'd you get that out of the parable? Talk about that.
Well, and again, I actually give myself the privilege to stretch the story a little bit, and you'll see that we clarify it. But I spent some time praying about it, and it's interesting to think that the Good Samaritan makes this statement. First of all, he took the man out of the ditch. He took him to the inn, and it says, and on the next day, right? So this just wasn't a pass through, a drive through.
Yeah.
He had, metaphorically, he had spent time with the guy, but he also spent time with the innkeeper. And so the next day, he begins the conversation with the innkeeper and starts to give him instructions. Kind of like, now you've watched what I've done over the last little short season. I've watched what you've done. I think I can entrust him to your care. And so here's where I would like you to take care of him. And if there's any other needs, in other words, I need you to be engaged. I need you to keep a scoreboard. I need you to watch the process. And if there's anything else that you need when I come back, which is showing kind of his continued engagement in the relationship, not only with the guy in the ditch, but also with the innkeeper, that, hey, I'll go ahead and I'll pay the bill. And so it has this tone of a multiplication. It wasn't like he continued his journey and he took the guy with him. He left him at the inn and he trusted him. He multiplied, he delegated. And so my whole chapter is on this. And I make this statement that I think is really important. I think this would really resonate with your audience, is that we should no longer measure our success as leaders by how many we seat, but by how many we send.
That's not one that anybody's measuring that I'm aware of.
Yeah, again,
not many.
I pastored a church, multiple thousands, 5 campuses, part of the movement where we had 13,000 churches in 40 nations. And so, but there came a point, even as we built our whole movement, it was called Manor House Global Movement, where we shifted, instead of having a network of churches or we moved it to a family. A movement of families. And what we wanted to try to do with every church leader, even in our church planting efforts, is as you start your church plant with the idea of multiplication in mind. Already be thinking, who is my first church planter?
Yep.
Like,
absolutely.
if you don't think about that in the first year, you're not going to think about it in year 5. And that might sound kind of mature. I was down in Mexico. This is a cool story, Greg. I was down in Mexico with one of our leaders. He had planted about 250 churches up in the mountains of Mexico. And he says, hey, I want to take you to this one church. It was in this village. And he says, I want you to meet this couple. There's about 55 people in the church. And through him translating, he says, I want you to meet our children's pastor. And so, okay, great. Out walks their 9-year-old daughter. And the pastor begins to tell us how they're already training her to be a church planter and her husband, whoever that may be in the future. And she began to tell the story of how Saturday nights, how her mom trains her how to do the curriculum in the class. And for the first year, when she was 8, would sit alongside of her and mentor her as she did it. Now she's on her own at age 9. And she's talking about already raising all of the kids in her class to be teachers in her class. And I'm just going, wow, like I just got saved, right?
Yep.
And I was sitting with him as a leader, and he says, okay, with all of his churches, he says, everybody pick your top 4, put it into the middle of the row. We're going to be praying about it and talk about how can you plant 4 churches this year? So sitting there with these 225 pastors, they're saying, hey, we want to grow to almost 1,000 next year because each of you are going to plant 4.
In 1 year. Yeah.
And so it's we're never going to grow by means of addition. You know, you look at the book of Acts, I think it's Acts 5 or Acts 6, it stops talking about they added. It starts saying they multiplied greatly. The word add never shows up again. And that's our biblical model.
Okay, so multiplication, and then number 6.
Go and do likewise, leaving a legacy. Leaving a legacy. If we are to apply all these things into our life, why are we actually here sucking air on planet Earth? Like what in the world are we doing? We can no longer continue to rearrange lawn chairs on the Titanic, so to speak. What is it that we can be doing to build something that lasts far beyond the time and season in which we live? And a lot of people build something for the time in which they live. But I want to 300, 400 years from now still have spiritual grandchildren. And so I talk about, the whole thing about Ancestry.com. A good friend of mine actually is the guy that helped start that company. But it's interesting. I began to go back and study my early roots going clear back into the 13th, 14th century. A guy named Alfonso Dieste. And where he was in Spain, and that Estes is, French Spaniard, and to just think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of relatives and generations that happened from this one man. I was just very taken back by this history and heritage,
hundreds of years.
Yeah, and I'm just going, God, help us to build for the future, right? The acorns of today better become the oak trees of tomorrow, right? Like, what are we doing to be thinking that way and how we lead and build? And if we don't have a multiplication mindset, we don't apply all these other things, we're going to finish our ministry and you're going to die with it,
Marc, I'm going to circle, as we wrap up here, I'm going to circle all the way back around to something you said in the beginning that I wrote down in my notes over here. You said we're in danger of missing one of the greatest awakenings in history. Paint that. What does that great awakening look like? Cast some vision for us here as we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, that statement alone it's kind of like end times, Jesus is coming tomorrow. There's always people, hey, we're on the verge of a great awakening. The reason why I would lean into that with a little bit more confidence today is, first of all, is that we're starting to see some promising trends. Gen Z is first generation in perhaps American history that are out attending their parents. We're watching what's happening on college campuses. We're watching the swell or the uptick of salvations. Barna just did a pretty decent report. I love those guys over there, good friends of mine. And again, we've been watching this gradual decline for a couple decades, and it's the first time over the last 2 years there's measurable uptick. When it comes to salvations, 74% of people are open to spiritual things. All of this parallel to some of the greatest problems, trauma, pressures. It looks a lot like the 60s. Jesus People movement. What was happening during that time? You have an assassination. You got John Kennedy, you've got Martin Luther King, you've got Vietnam War, you've got racial tensions, you've got like all of those things that were happening. It created something in culture that provoked people finally to look for something beyond themselves. It is so parallel to today. And so we're watching a lot of those same parallel tensions as well as starting to see some promising indicators. The challenge, like I said, is that we just aren't where people are at. And that is the whole point of the book. And my challenge to leaders is that we must travel the road again. Gosh, it's just such an important time for us as leaders.
Okay, Marc Estes, The Road We Must Travel Again. Marc, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you for the charge you're leading and for the generations you're affecting. Thanks for being on the Church Planting Podcast, Marc.
I appreciate you guys, and thank you for everything you guys do. God bless you. Look forward to being with you again.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.